Hey friends, it's computer stuff they didn't teach you. Arbitrarily numbered number 13. Just in case you feel that they did teach you this and you comment first in the comments that, hey, I learned that in school, that's fine. But we're going to talk about something in maybe a different way than is usually taught in school. This is meant for computer people who just never quite understood how these things work. Consoles, terminals, shells, command line. Hey, you need to learn the command line. Do you understand the command line? A lot of time you spend in an interface like this, whether it be in Windows or Mac, and then one day someone changes it and now you're looking at this and they expect you to know exactly what's going on, and that can be really confusing, and that's called the command line. We're going to talk about the difference between this and what it means. I'm going to do it in a way that maybe you haven't seen before. What we're going to do is I've taken Windows Terminal here and I've chopped it up into 4 panes. Down here where I am, where this green area is not going to be used, that's where I'll be. We've got over here in the upper left corner, PowerShell. We'll talk about that. Down here we've got what used to be called DOS, but we'll call it the Windows command line, the command prompt, cmd, and then above me, right there in the maroon, we've got bash, the bash shell. I've labeled it Ubuntu because that's the operating system that you'll be most familiar with, but that brings up our first point. So what's the command line? What's a terminal? What's a console? Well, a terminal or a console app is basically like a web browser or the command structure that is provided to you by a shell. So you can use Firefox or Chrome or Edge or whatever to get on the World Wide Web. You can use any terminal application, Windows Terminal, Xterm, iTerm. There's lots of different terminals out there to talk to a shell. A shell could be PowerShell, Bash, Ash, Fish, Oh My, ZSH. There's a ton of different shells and opportunities there. There's Command that's built into Windows. There's PowerShell. There's PowerShell Core. These are just text-based applications. They call them text mode apps, where you type some stuff and something happens. You type some stuff and you press enter. Now in this case, stuff isn't a thing, so nothing happened. You'll also notice that right above me as I typed stuff, because I want you to understand how this works, you're going to see my keystrokes, because people at the command line tend to move pretty fast. So I figured I'd put my keystrokes above us here using an application called Karnak, and Karnak is going to be watching. All right. Additionally, you'll notice that PowerShell has just a little bit of a blue frame around it. It's the frame that we're currently using. If I click over here, now Ubuntu has a little blue frame here. If I click down here on the Windows command line, it has a little blue frame. So I'll click between those, and I can also go Alt, use the Alt key. I'm pressing Alt on my keyboard, and I go up, down, left, right, and I can move from place to place. And you can see that those hotkeys are going to stack up, and then they're going to fade away. So that's going to show you what I'm typing. Okay. You'll notice when I typed something here in PowerShell and I didn't like it, I cleared the screen. I said clear. I'm going to do each command in each shell so that you understand what's going on. So I type stuff and PowerShell says, this isn't a commandlet. I type it in what I'm going to call DOS, but the Windows command line, it says that's not a recognized command. And then if I type it over here in Ubuntu, it says, oh, did you mean stiff? And then it offers to try to install something. So right off the bat, you see that different shells in different environments give different experiences. This one here in Ubuntu and Bash is trying to be helpful and tell me something. This one here is suggesting maybe my spelling is wrong. This one down here is just saying, well, it's not a command or a program or a batch file. But the fact is, I typed something and I pressed enter. That is a common thing that all shells have. Now, if I type in CLS here in DOS, and I type in clear here in PowerShell, and I type in, I made a mistake there. See, I typed really fast. I misspelled clear. Then you can see the keys that I pressed to backspace. Okay. Now, I might want to run clear down here in DOS and have that work, but clear isn't a command in the Windows file system. So what I did is I made it a command. Shells like this have different commands that you can type, and they have what are called aliases. So I can type alias and get a list of all of the things that I could potentially type and the thing that it actually points to. So if I type in alias over here in Ubuntu, here's a couple of places where I said L means something or LL means something else. I'll talk about those in a little bit. There are no aliases in the Windows command line. Again, every shell is different, and there's all kind of fun history that you can go and learn about if you choose to. So what I did is I wrote my own clear. You'll see here I'm saying where. Where is clear? And I made a batch file. It's a batch of commands, and it's right here in this location. I'm actually going to select that with my mouse, okay? And then I'm going to either hit Control-C for copy, or I'm going to right-click with my mouse, and I'm going to say type. I'm going to paste that in, and you'll see that clear.bat, it's just a text file with CLS in it. Why would I do such a thing? Well, if I'm going to show you a bunch of different command lines, a bunch of different shells, I was confused that if typing clear here and CLS over here might be confusing. I figure I'll type clear, which runs that batch file, and then runs CLS, clear screen, CLS, which is how you clear a screen on Windows. It also helped me introduce the concept of aliases. There's lots of commands that you can learn. I'm just going to teach you about 10 or 20, but there's hundreds. This is a lot like learning any language. You learn a couple of basics, you figure out how to buy bread, how to get food, and then you can move your way around. So we'll learn how to move our way around, and that will hopefully set you up for success where you can go and experiment with the shell that makes you happy. Another quick note about shells, there's a whole religious argument about which shell you should use. You should only use PowerShell. Oh, my ZSH is the shell for the people. No, use Starship. You should use Bash, or you should use whatever. Use the shell that makes you happy. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care. You're going to type some commands, you're going to press enter, and it's either going to seem intuitive to you or it's not. So it doesn't really matter which shell that you use. Let's go back to aliases. So first thing we notice here is that PowerShell has a ton of aliases. And if I type alias here in Bash on Linux, there's a couple of aliases. But we'll notice these ones that are talking about ls. And I'll notice over here that dir for directory and ls on PowerShell are both aliased to a command called getChildItem, as is one that's called gci, getChildItem. So that's interesting. Let me clear my screen. I'm going to type in ls. I'm going to type in dir. I'm going to type in gci. Those all do the same thing. In this context, it is a thing called getChildItem. So that's how you get a directory listing. We'll talk about directories in just a second. Over here, I type in ls. Over here in Windows, I can't type ls, I type dir. So dir works here. Does it work over in Linux? Look, it does. There must be an alias for that somewhere. Or I can type ls here. It doesn't really matter, again, which one you pick, but every shell is different. Every shell is different. And when something works and you wonder how it works, like here in PowerShell, I'm typing dir and ls, that alias is set up to make people feel comfortable so that when they show up in a shell that is unfamiliar, it'll mostly work. So if you were a Windows or DOS person, if you were an Ubuntu person, you showed up in PowerShell, you'd go, I'm confused, ls. Oh, cool. And then you suddenly feel comfortable. That's important. I'm going to go ahead and clear these. Clear, clear, which is our batch file, and clear. And then I'm going to notice this here, this right there. That little tilde, that symbol is telling me it is in the home directory. So if I type in pwd, print working directory, pwd, interesting, doesn't tell me that, pwd. Over here I'll type cd. So print working directory, print working directory. Doesn't work in Windows. You can type cd, it'll tell you your current directory. You'll notice it's also in my, what's called my prompt See how it's blinking right there? It's prompting me for the next thing I'm going to type. It's blinking, it's prompting me. Notice how your prompts are all different. Windows and DOS prompts usually include a drive letter, the C drive or the A drive or the D drive. I added some cool stuff to my prompt in PowerShell. That's actually my blood sugar. I'm diabetic, and you can search for Hanselman diabetes prompt to learn how I put my blood sugar in my prompt. Linux people are used to a prompt with a $sign by it. But either way, we have a current directory. It's the place that we currently are. On these, I am in C drive, in the users folder, in the Scott folder beneath that. And I can type change directory and go into the desktop. So now I am in the home directory desktop. Now PowerShell here, this is using a thing called Oh My Posh. You can go and Google for Hanselman pretty prompt, and I'll teach you how to do this. This is saying the home directory and desktop underneath it, which means I'm in C, users Scott, desktop. Down here in DOS, I can type in cd desktop as well. And over here, I don't think I have a desktop on this Ubuntu, so it says there's no such file, no such directory. That's because I don't have a desktop folder here. If I type in ls, I can see lots of different files and lots of different folders, but I don't have a desktop. I could make a directory called desktop. Nothing happens, but it made it. Type ls and see that it made it. And then I can go in there. And now I'm in there. So now on each one of these things, I am in a folder called desktop. I got there with cd. Now, in PowerShell, I can cd all over the place. I can go into my blog backup. And then I can say cd ... to go back up. I just went back up to desktop. I can say cd ... and now I'm back up again. cd desktop, cd blog backup. Now watch this. Tab. Yeah, that got me there fast. cd ... cd ... cd desktop tab, cd bl tab. I can also type cd hyphen and just go back to where I was before. Cd hyphen. Let's see if that works in other places. That's interesting. See, some places these things work, some places they don't. So you want to watch for that. All right, let me clear my screens. Each one of these is a shell. Now, if I say dir, ls, to look at my folders, I might want to make a new file. On a Ubuntu or a bash shell, you would usually say touch. You could say new file.txt. And if I say ls, there's my new file.txt. I want to see more information about that. I can add in some switches. These are all different switches here. Yeah, that's a very different ls than the one we got before. This ls came out kind of wide, and each one was in a column there. Here we've got a lot more information about what's going on. Nice coloring. Those switches can be described in what are called man pages. So if I say man for manual, like where's the manual? Type man ls, I get a whole list of switches. All those switches we were looking for. Remember when I said -A for all? Give me everything. And then I can just type in Q. It's right there, Q for quit to get out. Now, when I've typed a bunch of commands in any shell, you can press the up arrow. And each time I press the up arrow, I can see my history. Notice how I get a nice history up, 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 down, down, down in bash or in PowerShell over here, and over here in DOS or in the Windows command line. But the Windows command line, if I press F7, gives me this, which is pretty cool. It actually draws its history. That's a feature that I would really like in one of my other shells. And you're going to find that as you start exploring shells, whether it be PowerShell, Windows, or Ubuntu, you're going to say, I really like that one, and I really like that one. And you're going to end up wanting to basically build the perfect shell. It's very natural. Because what you're ending up with here are a series of small tools, and you're using those tools to work together. And you're going to say, well, I like the way this one works, and I like this prompt, but I really like this history thing, but I like the way this does directories, and I like the way I can move files around. And you might switch prompts during your career in computers. I can use all of these prompts fairly comfortably, but I kind of find myself in PowerShell more often than not. It's just Honda, Toyota, you know, they're all the same car, but I kind of like Honda. That's one of the things that you're going to have to discover to discover as you move your way through tech. So we said touch, and we made a new file. Okay, and I do the same thing over here. Well, on PowerShell, you can't go and do touch. You can say new item, and you can say make an item and give it a switch with the item type of file, and you could say new file.txt. And there you go, I just made a new file. And you might say, gosh, that is not nearly as cool as doing touch. Well, remember aliases. There's an alias for new item called ni. So I could just say ni file.txt, and now I've made another empty file that I could then open up and do something with. You're also going to find, as you play around with different shells, that there's a lot of different ways to do the exact same thing. There's AC for add content, and I could say add content some other file.txt, and then I could give it null or nothing content. So then I can say, hey, give me all the text files. There's the text files that we made just now. You see the date and the time. And look at this. I did a wildcard. Okay. Right here, we said, give me everything with this extension, star.txt. Now I've got two files here that are called sum. That's interesting. I could say dir sum star or ls sum star. Those things usually work the same. Those wildcards use the same across almost all shells. So if we try the same thing down here, oops, notice, okay, this is a great example here. So in PowerShell, I'm in C user Scott, and in the Windows command line, look where I'm at, C user Scott desktop. And I said, hey, give me some, all the files named sum, and I immediately, you heard me go, oops, uh-oh, well, I'm in the wrong folder. So how do I go up? I can go cd ... Okay. Or I could type the entire thing. That does the exact same thing. Now, remember that I typed this before. I could go up, 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 enter on Windows, or I could hit F7, enter, and do the exact same thing. Okay. Let's try that over here. Now we're in Ubuntu. Let's say ls star.txt. It has a different file system because it's a different operating system. I could say ll, my alias. Remember that I have an alias for ll that goes and puts in some other things for me. So I said here ll star.txt. All right. And that works great. But if I'm in the desktop and I do ls, it says I can't find that. There's nothing here. I say, oh, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, how can I get back? Well, I can go up like this, or this is a little bit tricky. I can go and search the history of all the things that I did before. I could hit Control R, reverse search, okay? Reverse search. And we could go and say, look, there's the time I typed desktop. Or I could say, there's the time I typed this. Search just for that. Control R, search for it, enter. So that allowed me to search through all of my history. That's a little bit advanced, but that's kind of a neat thing. All right, let's clear our screens with clear, CLS, CLS. Oops, see, can't do CLS. Got to be clear on Ubuntu. You're going to find as you move around, it's like going to Italy and saying a Spanish word. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. You got to watch out for that. So we had some files in each of these worlds. And I went and touched them. Notice that they are empty. They have nothing in them. I can prove that by typing cat for, concatenate. And I could say, hey, new file, cat space ne tab, enter. See how I found another file there when I did that? I could say some file, tab, enter. I could type alias to make sure I know what cat means on PowerShell. It means get content. Down here in DOS, cat isn't a thing. You have to say type some file. And over here, it's cat. So everything's different. Oh, that's interesting. Look at that. So foo.text actually has something in it. We can probably prove that and see that its size is 5, which makes sense. It's got 4 letters and then an enter or a line feed in this case. There's your 5 bytes, and that's why that's 5. So if I said cat new file, there's nothing in there. So how do I put something in there? I could use a text editor. We can talk about those another day. But what I could do is I could say echo, hey friends, and then I could do this interesting thing. Look at this. Hey friends, echo is a command in this shell. Every shell is different. I could redirect it. I'm pointing it. It's almost like those are pointing in that direction. I'm going to say put that in this file. If I had just one, it would make the file. It would clobber the file. But if I have 2, it's going to add to whatever that file already has. It's going to append to that file. Let's try that. Okay. And then we'll go back and we'll look in our file. Look at that. And then let's look at our directory. Look at that. See? Hey, friends. And then we see we've got 13 bytes. We've manipulated that file. Okay. Do the same thing over here. Actually, let's try it without those, and we'll clobber our foo file. All right. So now look, we've got a file with 14 and a file with 14. I can say cat foo. Let's say cat new file. And see, they both have the same thing in there, and that's because we clobbered it right here and we appended right there. Same thing applies down here in DOS. I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen. I could say echo, hey, it's Windows. Hey, it's Windows. Some other file. Oh, can't use cat. Got to remember your different languages and your different worlds. And there we go. Look at that. That's interesting. See how it put quotes inside the file? Let's try something else. See that? Look at that. What if I did no quotes? Would that work? This is another interesting thing to think about. Every shell treats quotes differently. Something like this might seem very counterintuitive to someone using Bash. They might expect to put a string between 2 quotes, whether they be single quotes or double quotes. But in this world, it's okay, which is a little bit weird. Over here, you definitely want to have those. These are the kinds of things that you'll bump into as you go and explore your shell worlds, okay? Now, last time we had a show, I made a file. Let's see if it's here. I think I put it on the desktop, called stacks. Okay, And this file here is my notes from episode 13 that I was using to go and figure out how to teach you all how stacks work. These are my notes. I'm just scrolling with my scrolly wheel. So how would I go and search that text file for a particular word? Okay, again, everyone is different. Let's clear our screens. Make sure that we're on the desktop on each shell, or we have that stacks file available to us. There we go. So I've got stacks here, stacks there. Okay. So let's do Ubuntu first. Okay. We're going to search for a word in Ubuntu. We can do it a couple of different ways. Remember that we can say cat stacks and then spit it out. Let's say I want to find the word no with a K. So I'm going to say cat stacks. Okay. And then I'm going to pipe it. I'm not going to redirect it. I'm going to pipe it. I'm going to pipe it into a thing called grep. Grep is a word you may have heard before. It is kind of ubiquitous for looking for stuff. If you grep through a bunch of stuff, you're looking for stuff. There you go. Look at that. So we just went through this whole file. We took the output of that file, which before went to the screen, and we put it into a pipe and fed it into the grep command, which then went looking for the word no. Let's do the same thing in DOS. Well, DOS doesn't have grep. Okay, so it's got a different thing. So it's got findstr. So I could go and say type stacks and then pipe it through findstr, find string, and look for the word no. Do the same thing. Didn't get the cool coloring there, but not too bad. That's cool. Now, a little bit different inside of PowerShell. In PowerShell, there are aliases for things, but virtually everything in PowerShell that has an alias has a big long command like select string is a thing, and gc get content is a thing. So technically, you're supposed to say get content stacks and then pipe that through select string, then look for no. And then I get the same thing I would get over here. Or I could type gc, that's an alias, type it through select string, SLS, that's an alias, and see no as well, which is kind of cool. Okay. You'll see lots of commands, whether you're doing Kubernetes, which we saw in a previous video, or really anything where you take a little command that does something, you take its output and you feed it into another command, and you feed it into another command, and you build up entire scripts, bash scripting. There's been books written about bash scripting or PowerShell scripting, or shorter books written on batch file scripting that will teach you how to do stuff to manipulate your computer, whether it be manipulating strings or manipulating a little bit more. The last thing we're going to see, as this has been just an intro to 3 different shells, is not going to be manipulating strings, but rather manipulating processes or processes, depending on what country you're from. I type in get process. I can see the things that are running on my machine over here in PowerShell. If I'm here in Bash, I type PS for process and see just the ones that are available to me. There's fewer because I'm not an administrator. And now in DOS or in the Windows command line, I can type tasklist and get the same list that I saw up here, or at least a pretty close one. Okay. So then if I wanted to, I could go and say PS, and then I could go and grep for something, right? I could say, is Zoom it running? But see, we don't have grep on PowerShell. So I've got to go and say SLS, select string, and then PS is an alias for get process. So here I went and I got those over here in DOS. I could say find string, and I could say Zoom. Interesting. So not sure why that didn't work. Maybe it's because it's case sensitive. There's a switch called ignore case /I. With any command you want to use in virtually any shell, you can ask yourself questions about it with either --help or /?, and it'll tell you about it. On Linux, we said man. I could learn about grep for manual. On PowerShell, I could say ps-help. Oops. Look at that. I can't say --help. Notice how I'm trying to figure out what it is it's going to tell me about this. There we go. They have man pages too. Not interesting. But there's always a way to figure it out, but they're going to be different for each shell. Okay? So just to be clear, I'll back up here and I'll say, find the process called zoomit. Come back down here, find one called zoomit. And I'm not running zoomit, of course, over here in Ubuntu, so I can't go and search for it. All right? The very last thing that I want to show you as you're thinking about different shells is the idea of who is administrator. Now, the concept of administrator between different shells really depends on the operating system underneath it. So for example, if I wanted to run a copy of Windows Terminal again, I could hold down Control and Shift. I'm holding down Control and Shift, and I'm going to click right here. It's going to pop up a question, and it's going to go and make a shell, and it's going to make me administrator. I've got my posh-git set to give me a little lightning bolt, and this thing popped up and said administrator. Administrator, you are someone who can delete everything and potentially hurt yourself. That is a Windows thing. Over here in the Ubuntu world, that's done with a thing called sudo, super user do. So if you want to go and do something, like if I wanted to go and install a program, it'll say, hey, you can't do that. You need to be a boss. So I'd have to say, okay, super user do that thing. Okay. And then if you don't like sudo, you think maybe that's a little bit mean, you're ordering them around, I could go and say alias, please. And I could say please is sudo. Now I've made my own alias. So I could say apt install Emacs, and I could say, all right, fine. Please apt install Emacs. Giving away my password. And now that's going and installing the program that I wanted. There we go. All right, and there's my alias. So, what did we learn in a short half an hour? There's different kinds of shells. Shells can be talked to with really any terminal application that makes you happy. Different operating systems have different shells. PowerShell is a shell that's available to you on Windows and Mac and on Linux. You can install PowerShell. Go and Google around for that. DOS, or the Windows command line, is the one that you usually see C: on, and that's been around forever and ever. And you might find yourself there. You can just go to the Start menu and type in command to find those different command prompts. Then Bash, the one that I'm using over here in Ubuntu, is just one of the many, many prompts available to you in a Linux type environment. And I have been accessing it using an instance of Ubuntu using a thing called WSL2, the Windows subsystem for Linux, that allows you to run Linux on a Windows machine. You can go and learn about that in my other videos. Now, I recognize that this is not the complete understanding of all things command line. It's just a primer. We talked about CD. We talked about making directories, moving a little bit around, changing directories from place to place. We talked about cat and type and looking at text files inside of those text files. Searching for stuff with findstr or grep. We talked about looking at processes with ps or get process or tasklist. And then from there, you can go and explore your own machines and pick the shell that makes you happy. And I would remind you also that I happen to be using the Windows Terminal, which has allowed me to go and do all this kind of cool stuff in different panes and add graphics and colors and all kinds of fun stuff. So be sure to check out the Windows Terminal. And if you like videos like this, please give me suggestions for other videos in the comments. And the best thing that you can do for me as I try to get towards 100,000 subscribers is tell your friends and have them subscribe. And then maybe I'll keep doing this. Thanks so much.